Welcome back to another episode of Making Sense with me, John Napolitano. We're here to break down the big questions high net worth families face. You know, the ones your investment guy never talks about. No fluff, no finance 101, just straight talk to help you make smarter decisions and keep your wealth working as hard as you do. Let's get to it.
Today is a special episode featuring a recent interview John did with Michael Gordon, founder of Inside Advisor Transitions. The conversation was a unique look under the hood of the advisor industry, specifically around the hot topic of succession planning. If you're an advisor, this conversation is critical. If you're a client, it pays to know how your financial advisor is preparing their firm to serve you after they exit the business. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
I've been very fortunate and privileged to have John Napolitano on with me today. John is a certified public accountant, certified financial professional. He's done a lot of interesting things throughout his career, still has plenty of runway to go. And I think this conversation, this interview, if you will be good for several different types of advisors, but I think advisors that are considering building out their team or that ensemble, so to speak, advisors that are potentially considering their own succession plan. How do I build that out versus how do I know if I should just flat out sell? Even those advisors that are open to perhaps running their own OSJ or creating their own RIA. But John's done a fantastic job of really being one of the few advisors and business owners that actually walk the walk, right? So hiring the next generation, doing a vast array of different things, running an RIA and OSJ, helping and coaching advisors throughout his career. So I'm happy to have John with me during this conversation. John, would you mind maybe taking a brief moment to kind of just share more about your background and career and kind of where you are currently?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Sounds good to me. So I am a recovering CPA. I no longer practice public accounting, but I take a lot of that nerdy tax knowledge and attention to detail towards the wealth management business. Started my firm right out of selling the accounting firm since 1992. And about 15 years ago, I started working on my succession plan. I just turned 68 this year. I started working on it at age 53 because, as we as planners know only so well, there's no guarantee you waking up for breakfast tomorrow. So you better get that plan started sooner than later. I now serve as chairman only. I have the enviable position of being able to work on the business only. I look at it from a 10,000-foot view down, which has been a lot of fun for me. And I get to mentor and work with my next generation of leaders. There are 3 primary leaders right now with several partner candidates within the ranks of our advisors.
So 15 years ago, obviously that was pretty purposeful. Was that something that you had considered for a while, or that's just something that inherently you knew that you would have to start? How did you know that you had to start solving for that?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I knew that, of course, having done this for so darn long, that you have to do it as soon as you have the courage to face the real facts that you may not wake up for breakfast, you may get disabled, whatever. But, my career took an interesting twist where we had a lot of advisors. We were at the time what's called the super OSJ. We no longer do any securities business. We're RIA only. So I had advisors in offices all over the country. And to be blunt, I got a little bored of mentoring and coaching advisors because, as soon as I flew back to Boston from Los Angeles, what I said, they forgot about it, man. The half-life is like 3 days. So I felt a little unfulfilled. And about 17 years ago said, you know what? I'm going to go back as a practitioner now and build my team and stop coaching other advisors full-time. I still did it part-time and just work on building the team. And it was within the first year or two of building the team at its infancy stage when I actually started on that succession plan. And I was lucky. I bumped into a young guy who was burnt out from a sales culture at a wirehouse, wanted to be a true planner. And I was very honest with the guy. I said, listen, bud, if you're willing to crawl through the dirt and do some really junky work, like help me establish what we're going to do, this will be good for you. And he bought into it. And today he's the president of the organization.
That's not only incredible, it's very fascinating. So for those advisors that, 49, 50, 55, maybe even 60 that haven't considered that next gen 2, you bumped into this person who is an incredible person. whether you bumped into him or not, you would have kept forging ahead. But can you talk to me about how do you properly identify the talent or the opportunity, and then also the mentorship and the coaching? Because from what I see, and a lot of times I have a tendency to focus on the advisors that haven't quite figured it out, but they can go through one, two, three, five, six different advisors that just don't work out. How do you solve for that, and how do you get that right?
Well, first of all, our hiring practices are pretty rigorous. I mean, I take the same discipline, let's say, that a large accounting firm would when they're bringing a young associate on board. We give them a Colby test. We want to understand their personality, what gets them fired up, what's their MO. And, beyond that, we give them a real job. I think most advisors, frankly, are still in the producer world, and they don't really think of their business as a business. They think of themselves as a producer, meaning the more revenue I generate, the more I net. Dude, that's got to stop. You got to start thinking of it as a business. And the studies for years that Mark Tabergi and Moss Adams and all the other smart people in our industry have talked about are metrics. Say 40% reward for labor, 30% for overhead, 30% for profit. And you have to kind of work within that range. So for starters, if you're going to look for someone, don't be looking for someone that's going to bring in a book of business or be able to generate new revenue to cover their costs. No, bring in an employee, a real employee. Have a job description, know what they're going to do so that you're comfortable with the investment that you're making in them is going to be profitable for you. It should free time up for you, in which case you can do what you love, whether that's play more golf or pickleball or do more business development or spend time with your AAA clients. So for starters, hire like a real business would hire. Don't hire like a producer would hire.
If an advisor comes to you or another advisor or firm and they have their own book of business, is that a deal breaker, or it just needs to be very specific for you and the firm at that point?
Yeah, great question. No, it's not a deal breaker, but we do want to make sure that the clients are of the same kind of profile that we like to work with. And
Okay.
these are clients that tend to be, more than just startup clients. They tend to have some stuff going on, a little bit of complexity in their lives, and they appreciate the advisor for the breadth of advice that the advisor can bring, not just to manage money or sell products or so. But again, that guy that's got his little book of business actually could be a really great find, because maybe one of the reasons they're talking to you is they realize, I don't think I want to do this business owner thing. I just want to be an advisor, and I'd love to get rewarded for the effort and the good stuff that I can do for the practice and my clients. So actually, in my opinion, that could be a really good candidate if they're coming to you for the right reason.
Well, that first advisor you described, I don't know that I hear that all that much. Like, hey, don't try to bring someone on with the book necessarily. If they have it, that's the cherry on top of the ice cream, right? That's a bonus. But be prepared to make that investment into that person, that advisor that's going to round out the team or help add value. They bring a book, great. Because where I was going to go, and I know you're really well connected and really well thought of in our advisor world and across different verticals. But it seems like so many advisors are trying to, how do I cover that cost? How do I pay for them? How do I structure their compensation to where I don't have to pay too much, but also not so much to where they're focusing most, or so little as to where they're focusing on their clients and not my clients? Could you maybe walk through that a little bit in terms of, maybe it's more mental and emotional for advisors, but it often feels like I hear this almost daily, several times a week. Well, I don't want them walking away with my clients. Obviously, there's contracts for these things, but if they do bring in their book, it always seems like advisors are trying to have the advisor pay for their own salary. So it's just, and where are advisors going wrong in that conversation?
Well, I think for starters, that let's bring someone in that could pay for their own salary is flawed thinking. That's producer thinking. Do you think PricewaterhouseCoopers worries about a new associate going to bring in new business with them? No. What they care about is they do the job. Can they bill enough hours, do quality work that's going to reflect favorably upon the firm and help grow the partnership? And I think the advisor needs to feel the same way. This may be a classic case of one step back equals two steps forward. And know those two steps forward are not just going to come on the backs of your new hire, it's on you too, buddy. And that means you just freed up, say, 40 hours a week. You've just delegated 40 plus hours a week of work to someone else. That should free you up to do things. And you need to focus on what are the things you can do to be more productive and more profitable. And as I alluded to earlier, that should mean things like spending more time with your A clients or doing some business development to help grow the firm. If you can't invest, let's just say that new person 40 hours a week shaves, say 10 hours a week off your plate, and you carve out a really smart plan for how you're going to use that 10 hours a week. And if you hired a new kid out of college, say it's costing you $75,000 all in, if I gave you 500 hours, you can't generate $75,000 worth of business, then maybe you shouldn't be a business owner and you should consider merging into another firm yourself. I know that 10 hours a week sounds like a little bit, but do the math. That's a lot of time. And with a good diligent effort, that 2 steps forward, frankly, 90% of it in year 1 is going to come because of your efforts and off of your back.
That's interesting. So I've been very fortunate to work with several firms of your caliber, right? 3, 4, $5 billion, $400, $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion offices, RIAs, OSJs, and they seem to kind of, at least on the surface, have kind of figured it out. Like they're not afraid of hiring or investing money, but I'll still run into that. Why? It could be a wirehouse advisor, it could be an independent advisor that's got $200 million of assets and they're still working virtually and haven't really hired anybody yet. And so it's that, I don't know if there's just an inflection point or you just get tired of it, but because I often think that, there's a lot of advisors that are accidental business owners, of course. And you've got this revenue. And if you're at a W-2 shop, you're giving 60% of that away. So how do these advisors get over that? Is there anything they can do to help get over that mental hurdle of taking that extra investment? Or is that just something that they've got to get so tired of doing the same things day in and day out that they finally make that jump?
No, I think there's a few intangibles there. One is confidence. Now, most advisors have a high level of confidence, especially if they came from the sales side of the house. So you have to have confidence that you can do it. You can grow your business. The second is that you want to grow your business. A lot of advisors, once they hit that kind of level of success, and let's face it, $200 million is generating $2 million of gross revenue. One can live a pretty awesome lifestyle on the net profit from $2 million in gross. So a lot of advisors immediately go to a lifestyle business. They work less, they play more golf, they see all their kids' Little League games, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of. I did that. Even while I was growing a business, I worked nights, of course, but I took the time out to do what was important to me. So you have to want to do it. You have to be deliberate about it. And then go inward on your practice. Who is it you work well with? Who would you like to do more work for? Where are they going to come from? How are you going to do it? Where do your good ones come from now? So I think it's confidence, the desire to grow, and then the willingness to do it and sacrifice, call it that lifestyle practice view.
No, these are great points. I mean, your perspective is you're uniquely positioned to have this conversation, and this is great. You mentioned the Colby assessments, the personality tests, making sure doing the work on the front end, spending the time and money and resources on the front end to make sure that that advisor is going to be a good fit. What are maybe some of the intangible things, like the attributes of an advisor, the ones that you partner with within your organization? What are attributes you think that are important, not just for today as you round out your team and build out that ensemble in a true business, but what's important today and then, 5, 10, 15 years from now? Which type of advisors or which characteristics do you think will make the best advisors today and then in the future?
Well, you got to ask some good questions here. Starting with, I want to know about their family life. What was it like growing up? Where were you in the pecking order? What was life like? Was it a good family? Was it a broken up family? Did you have, grandparents? How much time did you spend with them? I want to know about the background a little bit. The second is, I want to learn about the individual. A lot of the really big firms like to hire athletes because they have a competitive bone in their body. So I want to talk about what they like to do in their spare time and their past achievements. Whether it was in the forensics club and they loved making speeches, or it was on the little league field or the baseball diamond or the hockey rink, wherever it might be. I want to see that someone's focused on something that required some effort and commitment and that they got there. I also want to hear, what didn't go right? One of the lessons I learned at Strategic Coach is how to turn a negative into a positive. And that is, you look at that negative event and say, okay, if I had the wisdom of that event in my, background right now, what would I do differently to avoid that next time? So I want to hear what didn't work in that person's life and then what they did to kind of overcome that. Showing that they've got some initiative, some self-starter, some pride, some desire to improve, desire to get better.
That's right. You mentioned kind of that self-starter, that desire. And it's fascinating. So I'm working with several firms now where, they've got really incredible teams. And the folks I've been fortunate enough to help oftentimes are maybe even a little overstaffed for future growth, and they value culture and service, maybe, dare I say, even more than the overall profitability or margins on their business. But I do talk with a lot of advisors that say, hey, I built out this incredible team. My operations people, they're lights out. Our clients don't leave. We're adding, new relationships, but they haven't found their replacement necessarily. So I don't want to make it as simple as farming and hunting, right? I know maybe that's a little dated, relationship manager versus business development. But how, as you've given thought about, the last 15 years, how would an advisor go about making sure that, hey, I built out this great team, but even if there's several folks that have equity, who's that main kind of driver, the visionary? How should an advisor think about solving for that?
Well, again, that's going to be facts and circumstances based on each individual leader's kind of perspective. It's, you might have a few false starts. You might have a few bad decisions along the way. But you've got to go with the ponies you've got or start looking elsewhere. So if you have 2 or 3 key people, usually there's one, maybe sometimes 2 that have risen to the top, that go above and beyond, and I'll give you the comparison. Someone has a whole list of tasks to do. Employee A clears his desk at 5:00 and bails. Employee B gets that stuff done, and she's there till 7:00 at night to make sure it gets done. So the next morning she starts with a clean slate. In that scenario, employee B is more like partner material. And maybe you can even test the waters a little and give them some sort of incentives. We do this with our employees. We like to give bonuses, and the bonuses are not based on sales or new revenue. They're based on metrics that we think are going to make them better. So in the early days, it's stuff like, pass the CFP. It grows into things like join an organization and be active and be respected amongst your peers. Get an additional designation, an advanced designation, whether it's a master's in taxation or a certified private wealth advisor, something that's going to enhance your education and your knowledge base so that you can give broader, better advice. And if you come up blank when you're kind of trying to give out incentives to these people and or they fail on the incentive game, well, water kind of finds its own level. If they're not going to make their bonuses, they're probably not going to stick around. That's going to help you make your decision. And in that case, this might be an advisor and an owner that should look to a merger. Whether they're ready to retire or not doesn't matter, but you need to look to a firm that might be able to offer that depth of service, perhaps that knowledge base, perhaps that drive and motivation in their team and their staff that's going to help this particular advisor get back on track to growing their business and improving the value of it.
So you said self-started a few times, and I like that word because I've talked to many advisors that, they've come up, the old-fashioned way, right? Pounding the phones. That could be, door knocking before they went independent. There's so many different ways, right? And so a common theme I get is, well, these advisors don't want to work. And it's not that they don't want to help the next generation. I don't think that's it. They just kind of want the advisor balled in, or the next gen, I should say. Like they want them to earn it a little bit. And so as it relates to like equity, whether it's earned or given at some point, for that self-starter advisor that you believe in, is it I get the business owner. You don't want to just give it away, but is it fair to have that conversation? That junior, that associate advisor coming into the firm that is just checks all the boxes. Is it expected and fair to have kind of this pathway to equity at some point? Like, do you have that conversation from the jump?
We absolutely do. We have that conversation day one, and it's not easy to build kind of that way to partnership, the methods to get there. It's not easy. And it's different for everyone because everyone, one guy's going to be an operations person, one's going to be a client service person, one's going to be a technical specialist, whatever it might be. But we do have those conversations right out of the gate. In fact, by the way, I'm a horrible interviewer, so I need my team to do the interviewing because I believe everything someone's going to say, and I'm an easy takedown in that regard. So I let other people ask some tough questions. But, there's some ways that you can walk before you run. Equity doesn't have to be real equity. It can be phantom equity. And that is, okay, you're going to get a profits interest. You'll get a piece of the profits above and beyond where we are today. It can be phantom equity in terms of, the value of the firm today is $10 million. I'm going to give you X% of the growth between 10 million and next year's valuation, which, by the way, if the advisor's not getting their practice valued every year, they're not ready for this conversation. So there's a predecessor that must be done, and that is have a formal valuation of your business done. What you're going to find in the process, not only are you going to get a number that's closer to a real number in terms of what it's worth, but you're also going to find the deficiencies and the things that you could be doing better to improve the value of your business. And that might be amongst the tasks that you assign to your next gen guys. Hey, dude, we need to do better at this, and this. Therefore, I'm tying your bonus and compensation to these 4 things to help us improve and get those on our positive list instead of our detractor list.
This is awesome. So, you hate to say top producer events because I don't want to just attach you to a number, but as you go to the biggest conferences across the country, the ones that everybody wants to be at, right? The tables, the big boy table, so to speak, you're with other folks like you that have done a really successful and they've done a great job of building a business. So once you've made it that standpoint, like, it's kind of like, that makes sense. But that $3, $4, or $5 million office that's struggling to grow, it just seems like, okay, the business owner says they want to do these things, but then mentally, because you just said, well, you've got to be ready.
Right.
But at the same, if you want the top talent and if you want your firm to continue on, and you can hire a lot of folks and maybe your firm will be okay. But if you truly want the best outcomes for your clients and to maintain your legacy and scale back your workload, you need the top talent. And it just seems to me from the conversations I have, because I don't want to call it pro bono work, but I'll have some, Gen 2 type, 25, 30-year-olds reach out that seem pretty capable, hardworking folks that are kind of struggling, or they're at the wrong firm, or they're not giving a path to equity. And sometimes it's like, hey, have you guys actually had the conversation? So it's very easy for me to pull that 30 or 40, $50 million advisor away and get paid on it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. You need to have a conversation with Steve as an example. Well, Steve's not ready. Well, you need to be prepared to give him, I hate to say an ultimatum, but you need to be on the same page. And it just seems like a lot of these conversations aren't happening. Maybe that was some of the stuff that you dealt with in your OSJ, coaching days, but are you still finding a lot of these challenges? Because for what you've done, it's really rare. And I sit and think to myself, am I focusing on the advisors that haven't figured it out because that's just what I want to solve for? Or are there really a lot of advisors that have built and done what you've done? And the answer is not many people have done and built what you've done, at least the right way, in a way that's sustainable. So, how do these
So
guys?
here's where it starts. A lot of the advisors that are looking for that next gen talent, many of them are not entertaining the questions. They will not have the answer. I meet like young guys, 25 to 35. And by the way, I use the word guys interchangeably, guys, girls, whatever, advisors. I meet young advisors.
Here, you're good.
Advisors between, let's say, 25 and 35, where their boss is just not willing to have the conversation. So I would say, yeah, you can keep pushing a little, but that's probably just going to alienate the guy completely. So I think what you want to do is begin to weigh your options and what might your options be. Understand what it's like out there. Put yourself in traffic. Go to some of those conferences. Attend the Barron's Top Advisor Conference. Attend a coaching program. I enrolled my young advisors in the ClientWise coaching program. You know why? Because I got sick of telling them and coaching them on what to do. Said, it's like the Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah.
You're right.
It's time that someone else tells them the things that they need to do to get better and to grow the business. And it's working fantastic, and they love it.
But you're investing in your team, though, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
that's big.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what these owners have to realize, man. Like it ain't free to fly from Boston to San Diego to spend 3 days in the Omni Hotel going to a conference, but you got to do it. And I think I've learned most from hanging out with other top guys, because I find when you really go deep, these other top advisors, they're willing to share with you, man. You're not competing with them. They're willing to tell you what they're doing. They're telling you what works, telling you what doesn't work. And they've all got different ways. Well, we all want to get to point B being a wonderful business that provides you with financial, stability and all the lifestyle accoutrements that you may want to have. There's so many roads to get there, and you pick your unique path, and it's going to work better for you than just trying to mimic someone else's path.
It reminds me of that cliche saying, it's the CFO talking to the CEO, and the CEO saying, we need to spend money on our people and, get certifications and all these different accolades. And the CFO says, well, what if we invest the money and they leave, right? And then CEO says, well, what if we don't and they end up staying? And so it's intriguing.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a way to fix your latter problem as well. And that is, sure, I'll pay for your CFP. I'll pay for your Harvard MBA. And just like the big firms do, you have a 5-year employment contract with me. If you leave before that, you're going to pay me back a portion or all of it. So, there's ways through employment contracts to make that stuff good. And you mentioned earlier, a lot of advisors are afraid, well, gee, what if this young guy leaves with my clients? Well, that's a real concern for sure. You know how we dealt with it in our employment agreements? If you leave with our clients, knock yourself out. If they really want to go work with you instead of this broad, robust team of professionals that we have, they probably weren't a good fit for us. Take them. But by the way, you'd have to pay us for them. And how much do you pay? Well, we get our business valued every year. If you walk away with 2% of the clients, guess what? You owe me 2% of the fair market value of the firm based on the most recent valuation. I've never had to enforce that.
Well, and that seems, so it's that butterfly effect, right? You squeeze too tight kind of a thing, or it's too loose. So that's different than what most firms will do. They'll tie you up in litigation, or, hey, great, you got them. You've got X amount of clients. You owe me a check for this much.
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, we're serious about the partnership track. You're either the right person or you're not. And if you're not, frankly, the sooner you're gone, the better.
Yeah. So the partnership track, we haven't talked too much about valuations and multiples, but one of the biggest questions that I think I've got for you, because you've done it differently, for advisors considering their next phase or the next steps, how do you decipher or differentiate between, do I create my own succession plan like the way that you're doing, or do I sell out for the big number? Can you kind of walk me through that thought process of how you view that, like, and then pros and cons maybe of both sides of that?
Yeah. And again, from our real life experience, we've been approached by many firms to buy anywhere from a minority interest to a majority interest. Of course, they focus on the 68-year-old dude. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not about me, buddy. It's about the next gen, because they helped me build this. It's not just me. So the big number, if you will, it's attractive, it's appealing, but you can also get a pretty good number from your successors. So I don't feel the need to have to go out there and deal with a third party. And again, the key is in the valuation. Get that valuation done, know what it's worth, and know what you have to do to grow it. And if your team is on board with that, meaning they know the valuation, they know the objectives and know where to go, that's going to make it a little bit easier.
If you're comfortable answering this, so the difference or the delta between taking a big private equity check versus an internal succession plan, what have you seen out there, or maybe talking to some of your peers and trying to help them get to where you are? I mean, because in some cases it can be a pretty big number if you don't have a team that, maybe they're a little bit risk averse and don't want to take on debt, or maybe they don't have the capital to acquire you. And I know there's different levers to pull here. Is that something that they're earning over time? Is that gifted? What are some ways that, if I'm 65, 66, I've got a team of 10 or 12 people and I haven't gotten to where you are, I've got this team, but I'm 100% equity owner. How does an advisor how do they begin to kind of unravel that? And I mean, I get the legacy play, but is it, hey, I'm well capitalized, I got enough money saved, whatever the number may be? I mean, there's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's what's in the head of that sole owner. Is he out to maximize his wealth, or is he out to help build wealth and create careers for the people that helped he or her get to point B? I'm of the latter. I want to make sure the next guys do better than I did. And as a result, they want me to do as good as humanly possible, because then they know it's going to be better for them. So if you have the talent and they're good enough talent, you might start by doing a phantom stock plan. You might start by selling them a little piece. And I don't know what their capital structure is like, your next gen candidates, that is. So you may have to sell them a really small piece, or as we did in one case, we actually bumped someone's pay to cover the buying, so that it was net zero outlay for that advisor. So I would consider those. And then the last thing, just because the advisor decides maybe to take a big check and sell 100% doesn't automatically cast that person as a bad guy, because guess what? Buyers want your clients and your revenue, but they need people to serve it. So you're going to get a second bite at the apple, staff person. You're going to have a new boss, and that new boss is either going to like you or not like you. Maybe you should also do that kind of experience transformer exercise and look back at, well, what didn't work with the last firm? Why didn't I cash in on equity? What might I do differently with these new owners in order to position myself to benefit from the growth and what I can bring to the practice? And don't be shy. Ask the new owners about that. So again, your boss isn't a bad guy if he takes the check. Make
Right.
sure that that's clear.
Yeah. I guess the way that I asked it, maybe you could presume that there's no right or wrong answer. And I just wonder if it's, hey, I don't have that kind of energy and time to do what you've done, which obviously brings us back to the importance of starting early, right? And having these maybe not difficult conversations, but just thinking through them. And maybe if you've waited too long, or if you struck out with a few associate advisors, I could see how it might be a little bit easier to kind of just take that check and be done in a few years after your earnouts.
Michael, I could say this. Many times in the last 15 years, I'd talk with my peers. We'd share kind of things. Most of them made more money than I do. They had little staff, low overhead, never invested in the business. As a result, they grew slowly, but nevertheless, it was great cash flow because they had low to no overhead. Finally, 15 years later, and I'd say maybe about 5 years ago, the tide turned. All of a sudden, we had a real business with EBITDA, with scale, with multiple, with growing valuations. And they're still running a lifestyle practice, diddling around on the golf course, no overhead, to kind of, part-time person or two running paperwork and whatnot for them. Those guys are different than me. They're not business owners. They're producers.
So as your thoughts, if you have an opinion on it, how do you feel about all this money from private equity that's not here? I mean, it's been here for a while, but how do you feel? Not that you guys are doing it, but just private equity in general, what it's done for our business. What should advisors look out for if they consider that option?
Well, the first thing I'd say look out for is, if you take in a partner, an equity partner, understand what your exit is. What if it doesn't work? Are you kind of locked into a point where this isn't good? So understand what your exit might be. The second is, most of you don't have to sweat it, because they're not interested in you. They're looking for bigger deals. They're looking for $1 billion, $2 billion plus firms. So if you're a $200 million, $500 million guy, they're not really interested in you. They might be willing to tuck you in underneath one of their portfolio companies, but they're not going to be the ones that are going to buy you out, for sure. And in general, I think private equity, whether it's wealth management or the CPA world, where it's now really big, is good. Because what that tells you is they like the business. They like the business model. They think it's got some legs. And the headlines you and I read about the talent shortage, oh man, there's fewer CPAs now. There's going to be a CFP shortage in 20 years. That's awesome, because supply and demand is going to either raise prices or make clients be a little bit more sticky. So fewer professionals is not the end of the world, especially in this future world of artificial intelligence and technology, where I think we're going to have substantial efficiency gains in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe better than the G1 technology gains that we've had in the last 20.
It's you guys, I mean, you've obviously built an incredible firm. I've talked to a few of your partners. I mean, just, I think tremendous people for any age, but when you realize just the runway that they have, I mean, it's incredible. So you're doing things right. You're growing, bringing in new assets. I know you don't need to acquire to grow, but you all are open to acquiring advisors, businesses. What are you all looking for? So whether it's in Massachusetts, in Florida, out in the LA market, what type of advisors from just a character standpoint, and then maybe what type of businesses would they have should you all want to consider making an acquisition?
Great question. I'd say for starters, it's got to be someone that cares more about their clients than their bottom line, and that they do things based on what's going to be best for their client, what's going to keep them around longer, and what's going to cause them to want to send their friends to you. So that's starter number one. Number two is the profile of client. We're not interested in a firm that has, $1 million of revenue and 10,000 clients, for example. That's just not what we do. We want to do financial planning, wealth management, go deep with clients. So there's got to be a certain level of complexity to justify that level of work. It's not for everyone. And it's also an advisor or a team that understands that there's certain capacity or depth issues that they just can't get to. They always have a to-do list that's longer than their ability to get it done, whether it's their tech stack or the technical abilities of their team. You can't create a CPA with a master's in taxes and 40 years experience in 2 years. It took me 40 years to get there, so there's the depth, the need of depth. And last is someone that is concerned about growing their business and understanding that if they maybe latch their wagon onto a team that has grown their business, that has a great succession plan, that is in effect like a practice what you preach firm, then they should see that they'll probably do better in the long run by hitching their wagon to a group like ours.
And so you're completely on board with them, with you making an acquisition and them allowing to kind of still work, still grow and produce and grow the overall firm?
Yeah, and I think, frankly, the profile is it's probably better to have someone that wants to be a partner in your company than someone that's just looking for a check so they can go blow out of Dodge.
Now that's unique. I know up against time here, John. I cannot believe how fast this went. We'll love to maybe pick it up another time. I know you're super busy and have a lot going on. Anything that maybe that I missed this first go around, or anything that you were hoping to share with our audiences that I didn't ask?
No, not really, man. The only thing I'd say in closing is to anyone that does not have their succession plan written out, I don't care if you're 40 and healthy or 70 and have debt, get it done, will you? It's not fair to your clients. It's not fair to your family. It's not fair to the years of effort you put into the business not to do it right. So just get started on it now. Make yourself a client of your firm.
Thanks, sir. This has been great. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for tuning in to Making Sense. If you got something valuable out of today's episode, share it with someone who'll appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe. One last thing. If you love the show, open your app and give the show a 5-star review. Until next time, thanks for listening to Making Sense.
The views expressed on this podcast represent the opinions of each speaker and are subject to change. These views are not intended as a forecast, a guarantee of future results, investment recommendation, or an offer to buy or sell any securities. The information provided is of a general nature and should not be construed as or used as a substitute for individualized investment, tax, financial, or legal advice or service to any person. Financial planning and investment advisory services are offered through U.S. Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Certain representatives of U.S. Financial Advisors are also registered as representatives of Great Valley Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. To learn more about Napier Financial, please check us out at napierfinancial.com.